Thank you for joining Anne's Art Desk. These videos are brought to you by the City of Palo Alto and the Palo Alto Art Center Foundation.
Well, welcome back, or welcome here for the first time. I'll keep in mind the sort of widespread of experience with watercolor. And I will be populating the Google Classroom with lots of good ideas for you to look at in your own time. You can also submit work for review through the Google Classroom. And like next week, we'll have an open critique time where we look at all the artwork together. You can tell me ahead of time if you wish a private review instead of a public review if you're feeling shy. Or if you're feeling brave. We're very gentle and kind around here. It'll be fine. Does everybody enjoy the Google Classroom? Is it helpful to you?
Yes. Yeah.
I'll keep making it richer and richer. And you can also add things that you find that you want to share with your classmates. It's also fun to like respond to what other people post. It's a little tiny bit like a nice private little Facebook. It's pretty nice. So with that, I think we should get started. And I have here a few supplies I thought I would just share with you. If you've never watercolored before, some of these are pretty sweet. So at this point, I'm going to start talking rather quickly. And if you want to interrupt me and ask a question, you're very welcome to do so. So here goes. I'm trying to make it back into speaker view. Here we go. So I have, this is actually one of my favorite materials. It's a travel brush. So there you have it, into your backpack or into your purse or into your watercolor kit. It fits right inside my watercolor kit, which is really nice. I bought this thing when I was a poor student, a teenager, and I remember how much it cost. It was like $25.
Wow.
Yeah, I remember standing there belly aching over it. I've had it ever since. Really nice. This is something that I learned when I was about 6. I took sumi classes and we were supposed to transport our brushes like this with a rubber band. You can buy one of these bamboo sushi rollers at any grocery store and it keeps the tops really nice and clean. And it also lets them air dry, whereas if you put them in a plastic bag or in a Tupperware or whatever, they would rot. So this keeps them fresh and clean. I love it. I've had the same one for 20 years. Let's put that aside because we won't need it other than that. And then I have several different watercolor kits. This is one where I've just taken tubes like this and squeezed them into the spots. Let them dry. The paint doesn't go bad. You can just reanimate it with a little bit of water whenever you want. So this works really well. It's small and light, but it's difficult to travel with because it doesn't fold up. You can also, this is like a $3 kit from Michael's. This one is kind of funny. It's a children's classroom kit. And you know that because these two sets of colors are the same as each other, right? So it's meant to be shared by children, which is kind of sweet. It's meant to sit with kids and both kids use it. It's really, really, really cheap paint. And so it's not very good paint, but it is good enough paint to paint with. So if this is what you have, you'll do fine. There's also this kind of beauty. This is what I love to paint with. This is a Schminke watercolor set. It has 24 colors. And the way you tell between expensive and cheap paint, I can actually do a little mini demo here. Do a little mini demo. The way you tell is by the intensity of the color. So here we have really top end. What?
By updating. Oh, more than once?
So over here we have top end paint and we get it a little bit wet and you should get a very intense color. Kind of the more you melt it, the better it gets. And then over here we have kind of the other end. The $3 kit from Michael's. It can also make beautiful paintings. But see how one is saturated and one is not? You can almost get there. They're also just different colors. But this one will dry much paler and less intense than this one. This is also just sort of a mauvey purple. Oh, this is probably the same color, but yeah, here we go. So essentially what you're buying when you buy expensive paint is more pigment.
Pigment.
And what you're buying when you buy cheap paint is more binder. So the ratio to pigment to binder is different. Binder is just filler. It's cheap stuff. Schminkies are made with honey. They're actually sweet.
Oh, wow.
Really, of course I had to taste some. But I tasted the earth tones, not the cadmiums, because I don't need to metal poison myself. But they're bound with honey and gum arabic. So a lot of paint is made essentially out of a filler and pigment. So watercolor is gum arabic, or honey, or some other magic potion, and the pigment. Encaustic is beeswax and the pigment. Oil is oil and the pigment. Pastels are simply the pigment pressed together. And cheap pastels are binder pigment pressed together. So when you're buying, the reason things cost different, even though they look like they're the same color, is the intensity of the pigment in the product. So just so you know, these ones are fairly cheap paints. These are like pastel tubes that I squeezed out for an art party. And they're really nice. They're kind of a good amount of money for what you spend and a good quality for what you spend on them. I like using them a lot. So, but these are sort of my star players. I love this kit. One of my students brought these to class and I ordered them the next day. I couldn't help it.
And can you say the name of that again?
Yeah, these are schminkies.
How do you spell it?
Let me write it big for you because it's got so many consonants in it. Like that.
Ah, thank you.
Yeah. It has only one vowel in all those letters. They're a German brand. They've been making paint for a really long time. Super great sort of paint. So then I thought we would start out with some very simple sort of paint quality, paint materials, how to manage paint. And if you want to just listen and doodle as you listen, or listen and do, or listen, or just do something else, you're always welcome to do as you please in my classes. Somehow this paper got dirty while I flipped it over. So I thought what I'd show you is sort of how to do the basic washes and how to keep your color clean and how to set up your space. Because all those things are really important. And it's funny because I literally learned them when I was about 8, because I started taking Sumier classes at the Palo Alto Junior Museum a long time ago. So if you can see my whole setup here, let me move it along so you can see it. The other art supply I wanted to sort of feature is these watercolor pencils. A lot of you know I love these, and I have a lot of kits in my listed on the website. This isn't one, but they have this wonderful ability to melt, and they become watercolor pigment when you add water, which is pretty nice. So I have some recommended sets on my materials list you can take a look at. We'll probably play around with them in a few weeks or whatever. But this is really supposed to be sort of pure watercolor. And I kind of have to restrain myself because I love to muck around with adding other stuff like white paint or Posca pens or watercolor pencils or ink or whatever. But I'm going to try and be good here. So here's sort of exercise 1. And this is where you just need a nice brush and a clean palette and a beautiful color. Mix your colors together a little bit if you want. I find dipping into 2 colors that are right next to each other very nice because it seems to brighten them. And then the task here is to see if you can just do a flat wash without a lot of brush strokes. I don't think I have enough pigment. So you want it to just appear flat, as if your brush wasn't there. as if it was like spray boothed or something. And that requires kind of saturating your brush, moving it along. Kind of making the color even. And working quickly, because as it dries, that's where your brush marks show.
And
It
would
might be
you
better.
recommend a round brush?
No, I think I actually recommend this brush, this flat.
Oh, okay.
But any brush will do. And the better you can do it with all your brushes, the better you're a watercolorist you are. So you can be as neat and tidy about it as you want. But what you want is sort of a flat surface. Something that watercolorists often do, and I almost never do because I'm just not that sort of artist, is they work in flat layers. So they'll often wash something with one color and then wash it with another and use the natural translucency of the paint to add depth and volume. So it's sort of a glazing method. And you can do this as many times as you want. I need more paint, so I go back and dip in. It's working better with my flat than it did with my giant Sumi brush. And you kind of work that wet leading edge. You put the paint right next to it so that the edges touch and just sort of naturally blend. Wow, that's so beautiful. There we go. You can tell that I rested a cup on the paper. That it left a little mark. There we go. So that's a nice flat wash. I did better this time than I did that time. That's sort of kind of step one, and getting the control so that you don't have seams or lines or darker areas or lighter areas is kind of a little bit key to becoming a very good watercolorist. And there's a way of working in watercolor where people layer their colors up. Sort of, I find this sort of nauseating, but a lot of people make very beautiful art this way, where they'll start with a yellow, and then if they're painting a leaf, they add, 6 layers of blue or green to make it the perfect green. And it's a very delicate and beautiful way of working. It's just sort of antithetical to my personality, so I tend not to do it. So you can do that as many times as you want, but the sort of next sort of level up, kind of leveling up a little bit here, is to do what we call a gradient wash. And I'm going to actually do a gradient that is simply a dark color to the white of the paper. So the first gradient we're going to do is just trying to manage the paint so that it slowly, slowly goes from super dark to nothing, to just water. So I need some really good dark pigment at the top. Oh, there we go. And then I'm just going to keep working and adding white paint or adding water to my mix. I don't necessarily even need any more paint. And I can also dilute my mix so that I get kind of a mid-tone where I added a bunch of water to the actual palette. Often watercolorists work with a slightly tilted canvas, but I'm not doing that here just because of various. And now I want to rinse my brush and just go pure water. Like this. You get this very beautiful gradient wash. To me, it feels like there's a really big line here, so I'm going to come back and try and smooth out that line a little bit. It's not perfect. I think some people love watercolor because they love the challenge of perfection. I love watercolor because it's not perfect. So you can use it to satisfy either. Like, I love finding out what happens by accident. Other people love exerting control over a deeply unpredictable medium. So both approaches result in really beautiful artwork. So it doesn't matter what sort of painter you are. Seems like it needs a little bit more pigment right there. This go back in and fix is verboten. This is not what watercolors do. This is what I do. A formal watercolorist would not approve. They would just do it right the first time. Any questions so far? Everybody good?
Yep.
Playing around in the puddles? It's all puddles. So here's another one for you. Now we're going to do a gradient wash that goes one color to another color. Something that would be nice for me to say right now is that if you watch my process, you notice a lot of brush washing and brush dabbing. Wash, dab, wash, dab. It's actually really, really crucial to being a good painter in any medium that you have essentially really good paint hygiene. And that is washing between color changes, making sure your brush is not hosting anything that is not pleasant, and just making sure that as you move from color to color, you're in control. And that control comes from having a clean brush. So now I'm going from blue to yellow. This is sort of a gradient wash. But it's a gradient wash where instead of going from light to dark, you're going from color to color. So right now where I want it to become really light, bright, beautiful yellow, I have to do an awful lot of dabbing and washing to get all the way down here, because otherwise it's just going to pollute with the blue. There we go. And I may add some extra yellow because that will help push the green back the other way. Essentially, watercolor is kind of a density game, where the more pigment you have, the stronger that area is against water incursion. And then if you add water, like pure water, then you'd get this different, the pure water pushes the density away. So it's kind of volume versus density. Sorry, that went really geeky, but never mind. You can play with it if you want.
And do
Yeah.
you sometimes wet the paper first before you put the paint down?
That's our next one. So this time, just water. So make a puddle that's just clear water. And you can do a gradient wash in it. You can also just drop stuff and see what happens. See how the water pushes against the paint? But then as I add paint, the paint starts pushing back and starts traveling through the puddle essentially at random. Well, not at random, it's just that fluid dynamics are really complex. So this is what you call wet and wet technique. And if you drop stuff in, you'll start seeing really beautiful, beautiful patterns. Something that you can do is like make a spot that's really high pigment on a dry surface, and then wet the surface around it and see what happens. So where it touches, it bleeds out. That's really pretty. You can see where there are big puddles, it's a lot harder to drop the paint in. It's like the water resists it a little bit. But where the puddle is pretty shallow, it's pretty easy to put the paint in. So those are all fun things to do. If you are doing wet on wet, you can also just tilt the paper and see where the watercolor goes. And mix it with gravity, essentially.
Ann, can you hold it up to the screen after you tilt the water? Thank you.
Do you think you could identify each one of those squares by writing what they are underneath in case we wanted,
Like the color?
no, like that this was wet on wet
Oh, yeah.
technique. This is,
Yeah, sure. And then I can put that in
yeah,
I'll photograph it and put it in my lecture notes.
great, thanks.
There you go, 2 samples of each. There are probably other ones that I'm forgetting. Oh, and let me get something because there's something else I wanted to show you. Table salt is actually something you can use for watercolor.
Mm.
So this is just the salt from my kitchen. And if you drop it into the watercolor, it does fun things. And if you have to be very patient with it and let it dry. And it will essentially absorb the salt and make little speckles and spackles. People use that a lot for water effects. And I'll write with salt here so you can see the effect once it dries. You can also use alcohol. You can drop in rubbing alcohol, and rather than pulling the pigment in, it pushes it out. So all those things are super fun, kind of watercolor toys. So notice that it's gotten messy really, really fast. And one of your jobs as a watercolorist is not only to keep your brush clean, but to remember that when you put your hand down, you can then print your painting someplace else. So don't rest your hand on your painting. Don't drag your hand over your artwork. Watercolor is really difficult to control. I think a lot of watercolorists do a lot of sort of cleaning up as they go. Let me put this aside so it can dry. Here's another page.
And
yeah,
I have that same Schminky set.
Yeah.
And I made this little, I don't know if you can see it, this little paper where I painted some of each color. It came with the set, actually. You could fill it in. Because when you look at the dry paint, it's hard to tell what the color is going to look like.
Well, when you buy really nice paint, see how many of them look black? But they aren't. They're just really high concentrated pigment.
Mm.
So breaking them out and making a little color swatch is a wonderful idea. So, well, it's leaking, which is not helpful in my plan. Let me pull another piece of paper. So that is pretty much sort of the basic wash techniques you can use. There are a lot of other techniques. Sorry, this paper is pulling out loudly. I'm sure it's getting recorded. There are a lot of other sort of basic watercolor techniques you can use. So when you have a brush like this, which is sort of a Japanese sumie brush, you're taught to use it in all sorts of different ways, which is really neat. And you can do this with any brush. Like I have a lot of really cheap little kids brushes. I always feel like children are given art supplies that are impossible to succeed with. But I always feel like every brush can make its own mark. It doesn't matter. Like brushes can be expensive or cheap. A really expensive brush will change your life forever because you will fall in love with it and you will be ruined for cheap brushes. But every brush has its own part to play. So when you're taught Japanese or Chinese brush painting, you're taught to paint like this, but much better, much more precisely. Some of you can probably do real calligraphy, but I can't.
And it might be nice to get your list of what might be nice to get for grandkids in a art, a
You know, I'm
small
actually
art.
I'm working on a project right now that's still in my head, but I'm hoping to bring it to fruition because I really feel like we're going to be in this work from home situation for a while. And so I'm going to make little grocery bags of cheap yet appropriate art supplies and distribute them.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And I think I may try and set them up as sort of a buy one, give one model.
Mm.
To friends or people who can afford them, and then they pay twice as much and I give the others away.
Oh, nice idea.
And then they get distributed through, there's a lot of people in our town helping people who've lost their jobs, and they'll get distributed through those points. But I haven't actually done it yet. But I will add to my blog a list of sort of artworks that are art supplies that are worth playing with, but are also fairly inexpensive.
And is there a place you recommend ordering from?
Yeah, I like Dick Blick, and I have actually enabled on Dick Blick some really nice pre-filled shopping carts. And you can go to my pre-filled shopping cart, click the things you don't want, and then buy, which is much easier than buying one by one. So you can take a look at that. They're linked through all my classroom and website and stuff, and I'll send it out again. So anyway, I was gonna tell you a little bit about brushwork. So there's sort of what I would call, you know how you can sing legit and you can sing rough. There's sort of legit brushwork, which is, just brushwork. And something you might enjoy doing right now while I'm yakking is just see all the things your brush can do. Something that's kind of fun is to load a brush up with a couple different colors and then look at the beautiful mark it makes. If you get into sumi-e painting, then all of a sudden you start painting bamboo like this. I like this sort of indigo ink for bamboo. That's kind of neat. So this kind of like just playing around with the brush, getting to know your brushes. I don't have very good brushes right now, and something I'm going to give myself as a present is some much nicer brushes.
What brand do you really go for, the high end?
There's this person who's sort of taken brush making by storm lately. Her name is Rosemary, and she's out of Yorkshire. And maybe she's just Instagrammed really, really well, but I'm probably going to buy from her. So she's called Rosemary Brushes. But she started doing the circuit, like the convention circuit and stuff, and everybody's really, really pleased with what they get when they buy from her. So I may buy some Rosemary brushes. Kind of classically, this series Da Vinci, these are very, every art store will have a Da Vinci brush. They're very nice brushes. If you buy a Kolinsky Sable brush, you will probably be pretty happy with it, but you got to take good care of it, and it will be enormously expensive. This is a synthetic brush, right? They're cheaper than real brushes. They're cheaper than hair brushes, like Kolinsky Sable or something else. They're fine, but an actual brush made out of fur or hair is a thing of wonder, really. I also find that these sumi-e brushes tend to be cheap and available, and they tend to have a lot of versatility. So even though they're not very expensive, I find that I love them. So they're also good. These are available at most art stores.
And
yeah,
when you're using the pan watercolors, I find it's really hard to fill up the belly of these quill brushes. To make a long continuous line that doesn't peter out.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that people who use brushes this size and who paint really, really large don't use this kit. I mean, this really is a travel kit. they probably use a 16 by 20 palette with, you know, with bins in it that are, here, I'll draw one for you, that are about this size. And there's a lot of paint in there.
Yeah.
So as soon as you're going big, you're just gonna have to go big with your materials too. Because this really is a sit in a cafe in Europe and paint a lovely painting.
Mhm.
Or go to the Sierras and paint lovely paintings.
Mhm.
Yeah, so yeah, I think that if you want to paint bigger, you have to just go bigger. And I have one of these kits in my storage. I just don't generally pull it out because I don't have room. And I also don't paint watercolors that are, you know, 30 by 40 inches. Or even 18 by 24, you'd want a bigger kit. Oh, I wanted to show you this other kind of brushing that a lot of people like to use. And it's called dry brushing. And it's something you have to do, you have to kind of practice. And the idea with dry brushing is that the paint kind of runs out. But look how sort of expressive and lovely it is. So see how my brush isn't full of water? It's just putting down a little tiny bit of pigment. A lot of people use dry brushing for like branches of trees, for hair. So there are lots of ways to use your brushes, and you should just play around with all of them because they're all fun. It's kind of a goofy little cartoon. So let's see. We keep checking on the time. I thought what we would do that kind of results in a neat piece of artwork by the end of class. Let me find my little, I made a little template for you. And now I can't find it. Oh, here it is. So the idea here is you kind of put your work, you kind of put your work into practice. And I drew this just so you, not so you can do it yourself, but just so you can see what I'm up to. And the idea here is that you take some straight lines. You can freehand draw them or not. And you just draw them like this. Can you guys see that? You'll erase them later, so make them really light. And I'm gonna get a cleaner piece of paper because this is gonna bother me. All right. So I'm gonna do it with a cleaner piece of paper because I might actually make a piece of artwork I like. I'm gonna redraw my drawing. All righty. So the idea here is to essentially make a watercolor sampler. And I thought I had a sample, but I don't know where it is. So I'm just gonna do it. You take some really beautiful color. And if you're new to watercolor, something I often do, let me show you this on screen, is I add a little bit of clean water to each bit. That's not clean. To each little spot in my palette. And that way, when I come back, and I need that color, it's already ready for me. So I keep dipping in, a little bit clean water, pat, 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 dry, a little more clean water, pat, 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 dry. You get it. So I'm just making my way around, making all my paints kind of a little bit damp. Because if you have to scrub at your hard as rock paint tins, they're not paint yet. They should be about the texture of milk when you're painting with them.
Mm.
So just for the sake of Mrs. Izuke, my sensei from when I was 8, my setup is generally the water cup is here on the right, The paintbrushes and the dabbing cloth are here, and the palette is here. This way, if this was over here, I would get a lot of drips on my paper. So this way, because this is right-handed. If you're left-handed, it all has to reverse. But this way, I'm never, when I'm going from dab to water to paint, I'm never crossing my paper, which really helps just not have it get splattered. So it's kind of neat. So what we're gonna do here, this is sort of really fun, is take some beautiful color, start on one of your lines, and make a row of marks. Kind of the same as each other. Very meditative exercise. And then something that's kind of nice to do is wash your brush again and maybe drop a different color in there and let it sort of diffuse. So we're essentially just making a watercolor sampler. And you can do what I'm doing, or you can just start doing what you're doing. So now I'm going to pick up another brush and do something else with another brush. And maybe I also want to add something else to that. Notice that I tend to choose colors that are analogous or next door to the color I'm working with on the color wheel. So with oranges and reds, I'll choose oranges and reds. So it's close by, but not the same. If you add a blue to a red or a green to a red, you're going to get a brownish sort of mucky result. Whereas the analogous colors make things brighter and sort of more fun. You can also change it up a little bit and add a different analogous color. You could also add something to the other end. See what happens. Let's see, I'm going to change brushes again. And I think I'm going to do a purple. I like this purple a lot. Oops. And then maybe see what I can do with the purple and maybe a blue. Like that. I wonder what happens if I add a little bit of water to each one. I also think this might be neat with a sploosh in the middle, but I'm not sure I want it to be a green sploosh. I want it to be a yellow sploosh. So I have to clean my yellow. Something you'll have to do as a watercolorist is just keep your yellow super clean. If it has any blue in it, it's going to turn green. So you just have to be careful to either wash it out or keep the blue out of it, whatever. Let's see, I'm going to do another one. So for this one, I'm slowly changing the color, and with each dip, I'm dipping into the color next to it. So that there's a very gentle ombre effect. Kind of fun. Maybe I need to like do something like this. I kind of like this idea because it kind of gets you this nice, like a sampler, like doing an embroidery or something. Pretty pleasant. I think I need some lighter colors. Let's try a green. The green's a little mucky, so I gotta clean it out. And I'm gonna change brushes again. See what this nice big brush can do for me. Here we go. You don't have to draw right on the line. You can draw next to it. The lines just exist to kind of keep you in bounds. And I kind of like this idea of sort of slowly changing it as it goes down the page. Because the more control you develop over your color mixing and your brushwork, the happier you'll be. Then I once again have to clean my brush, and I want a little yellow in that last one. Something that's fun to do is to just put other stuff in between. Let's see, let's try this one. And then, you know, something that watercolorists do that I always caution people to not do is they don't add enough pigment to their mixes. So something you can try and do is find a place that's still sort of wet, sort of supercharge it with pigment. Because it's a little bit like a stone in a river. You know, you pick it out of the river and it's a beautiful glowing green, and then it dries and it's sort of a matte brownish color. That happens with watercolor too, and you just have to be aware that it's going to happen, and sort of just make yourself ready for that. So the way you do that is to supercharge your pigment so that when they dry, they're still bright. When they've lost the water shine, they're still bright. So because some of you are newbies, I feel like I should say, notice that like just look at the stance of my hand in the brush. See how far back on the brush I am? And my hand is loose. And I'm working from the shoulder. This is sort of key to kind of drawing in general and watercolor and everything else you might do. Because when you work from your shoulder, you're not dragging your hand across the paper, so things are cleaner. But you're also just a little more relaxed. You're sitting up a little farther. You're breathing. And all those things are important for drawing well. So if I were clenching it like here, I get a very different mark. This is for handwriting. This isn't for painting. So if you're painting, you can still use the handwriting hand position. Just back it way off, take a deep breath, relax, and sort of just enjoy what the brush is doing all by itself. Just making a beautiful decorative picture. I find that these are interesting because they often come out being something I would like to frame.
Really?
Because they're just so simple and straightforward and relaxed. There's something very kind of refreshing about them. These ones look like California poppy petals. Oh, I'm going to think about bamboo leaves as I do these ones. Nice. That first one's lame. Do it again.
Oops. Close it down.
That's kind of fun. So the tricky part is waiting until it is dry. You guys all seem to be happily painting, so I'm gonna find something else to do. Does anyone have any questions about this one?
Nope.
I think I'm making mine too busy. I think I should stop.
If you erase your pencil lines, will the paint lift with it?
So here's what I mean by waiting until it is dry. The paint has soaked into the paper or will soak into the paper. The pencil line rides on the top of the paper. So if your paint is not too thick and it is dry, you can erase the pencil lines right off. And the lighter you made them, the easier it will be to erase them. So you should be fine. But again, a lot of mine is really, really soupy. So I don't want to erase the pencil lines for like 20 minutes. Or I'm going to get a hairdryer and hair dry it, which is also another approach you can use.
And I have a quick question. How old is watercolor? How far back does it go?
I don't know how old watercolor is. You know, there are encaustic paintings in Pompeii. The Lascaux cave paintings are probably watercolor. They're probably clay mixed with water and then painted on the wall. They've actually found what are essentially prehistoric palettes where there's a little lump of pigment, ground clay mixed up with water. So there you have it. A lot of people have used frescoes or a milk binder, which is classically really, really difficult and hard to preserve and degrades fast. Casein is a better binder and people have used that for a long time. So casein is egg white. Yeah. Essentially, if there's a chemical, somebody's mixed it with paint, see if it works.
That's interesting.
And acrylic are essentially the very newest, the newest pigment because they are literally plastic. So they're the most recent pigment on Earth. Yeah. But as for formal watercolor with all the beautiful colors, I don't know when that started. Look it up. There are tons and tons of geeky paint books about things like that, which I really enjoy reading. Where pigments come from, what pigments we still use, what have passed away for one reason or another. A lot of pigments that used to be really, really expensive have been replaced by chemical formulations that are cheaper to make. So we literally, to get this color, let me fish it up here. Is it this one? That's cobalt. It's probably this one. Literally, to get this color, they used to grind up lapis lazuli, and now it's made chemically because that was really expensive. Reds, the reason that there's still cadmium in paint palettes, which is toxic, don't eat the paint, even though it's made with honey, is that these cadmiums are so good at making bright yellows, oranges, and reds. And there isn't much on Earth that's good at making bright oranges, yellows, and reds, so we still use them. So these actually have heavy metals in them. But you know, this I don't use my earth tones very much, but these literally are clay. They are literally dirt, finely ground dirt that's been dug up. This one's chalk and dirt. But these earth tones are literally dirt. So this is carbon. And then these are various clays. Which is kind of neat. Yeah. That's why when you buy earth tones, they're much cheaper than when you buy cadmiums and reds and blues. The brighter, more specialized colors are more expensive. So again, when you're buying fancy colors, you're literally buying something that's worth it. It's very carefully made to be bright and archival and intense. Here, let me do a little. So that's one side. And then if I go over here to my little children's palette, you can kind of see that they're just not as oomphy as the Twinkies. You have to paint over and over and over them to get a bright color.
Mm.
It makes more sense to buy fewer colors and paint well with them. They also don't reconstitute as well. Like I noticed my Schminkies become paint much faster. These ones are harder to make back into paint once they're dry. This one's pretty good. But look at the difference between Schminky and kindergarten paint. Not to knock the kindergarten paint, but it just doesn't give you what you need. You can still make really beautiful art with it. Because really it's about the creativity you bring to it, not about the stuff. But you can see the intensity differences.
Mm.
So when something says student grade, don't buy it. Because what they're telling you is they didn't put enough pigment in it. All righty. Anybody have more questions? You're all happily making your samplers, I know. It's actually really neat. When I switch to gallery view, everybody's really is happily painting.
I have a quick question, Kathleen. How do you feel about the beauty of the white page against the watercolor? In other words, less is more in terms of having a lot of white space in which it floats. I find that lovely.
Yeah, I actually really like doing that.
Yeah.
I find that with watercolor, I tend to use the white color of the paper, whereas with like acrylic or oil, I tend to fill it in. Like here's a filled in acrylic, very much the way I would do things. And then with watercolor, I often use the white of the paper. And since watercolor doesn't have white, the paper becomes a design element. So this is a field sketch from up in Mendocino, and I just let the paper be a big part of the picture.
Oh, wow. That's nice.
Yeah.
It somehow pops the colors for me, and yeah, and makes it very serene.
What?
Serene. It makes the painting serene.
What does?
Green.
All white, and it pops.
Oh, yeah. There's kind of a Zen-like magic to leaving the paper.
Mm.
I really enjoy doing it. Let's see what else. That's a gouache painting. But occasionally, like this is a watercolor painting where I pretty much filled it all in. I liked it, like that. This is a watercolor painting that I much more did as if it were an acrylic. And that one as well. So it kind of just depends.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this one's gouache. But I did use the white of the paper for the clouds and the moon and the snow.
So beautiful. So
Yeah,
pretty.
these are all little field sketches.
You should put those in the Google Classroom so we can look at them at
yeah,
more
sure.
length.
Sure.
Oh, good idea.
Okay. You can take a look at them. I'll also put people I follow in the Google Classroom so you can take a look.
What?
Mm-hmm.
Last summer when I got to go to the Sierra.
Oh, that's pretty.
Mm.
This one never got finished. That happens.
What kind of book is that you use?
What?
What kind of book is that you have right there?
Oh, I love these. This is Moleskin.
Uh-huh.
Mm.
They're available in bookstores. Let me see if there's a mark. That's the only mark they give you because they're so cool.
Yeah.
Mm.
So what is the size of that? Like 3 by 5 or 4 by
This
6?
one is probably 5 by 8.
5 by 8. Okay.
Something I tend to do is go through and mark off the 5 by 7
Uh-huh.
thing,
Uh-huh.
so that if I did want to frame this particular piece, it's already standard size.
Mm.
That's something I standardly do with all my sketchbooks is whatever it is, I'll go through and just mark that standard size. So that when I do want to frame it, I'm already about at the right spot. There's sort of nothing more annoying than doing something like this and then deciding you want to frame it. Because
Uh-huh.
you have to pay the framer to cut you a special frame or whatever. So it's always good to just work in the right size.
Mm.
The other book that I carry with me all the time is something more like, it's bigger. This.
Mm.
And this is just a bigger book. And this, notice that the paper, you can actually hear it. It's not drawing
Yeah.
paper. And that's important because this stuff can take a beating essentially. These are all Posca pen sketches. I love this one.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Isn't that cool? So I went to Coyote Point with my kids to the little museum there and drew for this. It was really fun.
What's that color? That color in the background.
Oh, that's gold.
Is
Oh.
that watercolor?
No.
No, it's Posca because Teresa brought pastas to collage class and ruined us all forever.
Thank you,
Pasta-
Teresa.
Yeah. Then we all bought them.
And is that watercolor paper in that book?
Yeah, it's something called mixed media paper.
Mixed media.
So
Oh, yeah.
it's just really sort of heavy, 90-pound, heavy-duty paper, and I use it for a lot of things. It's not necessarily watercolor paper because it's smooth. So yeah, something I may do next week is pull out a bunch of papers and just show them all to you.
Mm.
Who made that brand of the mixed media? Or yeah,
I don't think this Canson.
Canson?
It's a Canson. And these were at Michael's. Just go to Michael's if I want to know. I think I put them in my online list as well. But what I'm painting on in class is just stuff. It's just watercolor paper I have in my house. Because I want something big that's not in a notebook. So just using what I've got. So yeah. Does anybody have requests or special questions or anything you'd like to see me do now?
Do you can you show us maybe the difference between hot and cold press? Like how does it look different when you paint on them?
I'll have to show you that next week because I'll need 2 pieces of it next door to each other, and I don't think I have them within reach.
Oh, okay.
So if you don't mind, I'll just do it next week.
Okay.
Because I thought that it would be good to talk about. If you want, we can do another exercise because I have another exercise up my sleeve.
And do you have tricks to keep your paints pure instead of, adding green to yellow and blue to red? And
well, I really just the washing and dabbing. Just kind of make it a habit of your life to wash the brush, dab the brush, dip in the paint, and
then wash it again.
and then wash again.
Okay.
Because otherwise you're just gonna keep messing it up. So if I then wanted to take, say I like this color, but I want to change colors, and I dunk this into a green.
Yeah.
I'm gonna make sort of the worst mistake here. My next bit will be green mixed with red. Right? And then I have to clean out my green with a paper towel or a brush or something to get that. So I'm already making it cleaner just by dipping and washing, but something I would actually do in real life is take a little bit of paper towel.
Oh, and dab it.
Wow, that green is almost empty. And then if I dip and dab,
Dip and dab.
come back again, then I get an actual bright green. So it's essentially a zealous adherence to washing your brush. The other thing that I'll post some of the beautiful Georgia O'Keeffe watercolors. But the other thing you can do is, say you wanted to put this color next to this color. If you do it when it's wet, you get this, right?
Mm.
They sort of auto mix. But once they're dry, you can put anything over anything. And this is where the glazing people do so well, where they have something glazed, and then if it's dry, you can put whatever color on top you want. And a lot of watercolorists work with a heat gun or with a blow dryer sitting on their desk, so that they can just move along at their own pace instead of waiting for the paint to dry. If you paint outdoors, you'll find that it dries too fast anyway, so the effect of the sun and the wind just takes care of that problem for you.
Mm.
Something that I loved that Georgia O'Keeffe did with her watercolors is she would paint like a beautiful mountain in some deep, rich color. And then rather than waiting for it to dry, if she wanted to put a big sky over it, she would just leave a little bit of white paint.
Mhm.
So notice that my brush isn't clean enough. She would just leave a little bit of white paper between them so that they didn't bleed into each other.
Mm.
She did these really lovely watercolors like that.
Mm.
They're very graphic, they're very beautiful, they're very unlike anything else she did. But if she wanted things to not mix, she just left this little bit.
Mm.
I really like them. I'll post them for you. They're sort of Georgia O'Keeffe secret. They're not very public, but they're very beautiful. And you can just see her out there with her little sketchbook.
Mm.
So that's one way to manage that problem. But of course, if you just close it, then you get the beautiful watercolor effect of things running together, which is also lovely. So whatever.
Mm.
That's neat. I also follow this wonderful woman on Instagram. I'll find her website so you guys can see her work. And essentially, she just does color exercises all the time. It's funny, there was a little bit of blue here and it bugs me, so I'm going to try and do something about it. There we go. So do you guys want one more exercise? We have time, or do you have a special request or a question?
More exercise. More exercise.
Guys.
Okay, here we go. I'm going to have to dig up another piece of paper. I've done a good job here. Sorry. Uh-oh. Okay, so you'll need 5 or 6 boxes in a row, and you can draw them with a pen or a pencil. And this is just a wonderful way to get to know your palette. And if you've been in my class before, this will look awfully familiar. I don't mean to repeat content, but for the people who've never done it before, it's such a lovely thing to do. And what you want to do, let me make a clean spot on my palette so you can really see it. What you want to do is walk from one color to another, and you can choose the color you want, whatever color suits you. So you just pick 2 colors, and what you want to do is go from one color to the other, smoothly and evenly in 5 steps, so that the distance between each step is about the same. And the way I do this is to, I like using the flat brush. is to pick a color, let's say blue. And blue is going to be over here. We're going to do a flat wash. Work all the wet edges together so it lays flat. And then what you want to do is have your blue here. And I'm going to do this in an orderly fashion instead of the way I would usually do it. So then I want to walk over to, let's say it would be fun to go to this orangey red. And over here I want pure orange red. So I had to do a whole bunch of washing of my brush to make sure it was clean. And so these middle pieces, this will be 50-50. So 1-to-1. And then this one will be 75% blue and 25% orange. And this one will be 75% orange and 25% blue. And being able to do this is actually really kind of important and not just important, but really, really fun. So what I'm doing is mixing up what I think is the middle tone and putting it in. It doesn't seem dark enough to me, so I add some more pigment. And yes, I'm dipping between the two of them, so I'm sort of breaking the rule of what I've just told you to do. But I will clean out my paint palette after this and make sure I haven't left behind any tracks that I have to solve later. So that's the mix of the two of them, this really beautiful rich brown. And then I want to take mostly blue and a little bit of brown and mix up this one that's between the 2 and the 100%. And you can actually see it on the palette. I'm doing it on the palette as well as on the paper, essentially. Mm-hmm. A lot of people think you mix your color on your paper, but you don't. If you want control over your paints, you mix on the palette and you put the paint already decided on, already tested on the paper. Now I'm going to go the other way and make a puddle of orange and then slowly add my 50-50 into it until I get something that's a little bit 3/4. Something like that. Oh. So essentially you're making a little swatch sheet. You could do this for your entire palette if you are the sort of person who likes doing that. But you can also just do it for, and just start learning what happens if you go from like yellow. And you will discover places in your palette you didn't know existed. You'll discover colors that you didn't know before, which is really fun. Just by mixing the two of them together in these different gradients. I'm gonna have to make a new puddle over here because I want to mix on my palette. So this is probably the halvesy one. And then if I add more of the blue, I should get all the way to the 75% one. Go. The 75% one doesn't look blue enough. So I added a little bit more blue. I'm gonna adjust it. If I work fast while it's still wet, it won't bother me much. There we go. And then I can also work the other way because I think this one needs to be darker. That's better. Wow. So that looks kind of almost right to me. I think this one needs a little bit more or something. There we go. And you can just keep making these. They're very fun to make. And they not only teach you what other colors might be lurking in your palette. They also just teach you control over your paints. How to use the brush strokes, how to keep things intense. Here I decided that this 75% blue wasn't intense enough, so I just put another coating on it. And now it looks better. I could also decide that this one needs another coating. So see how these two are too far apart? That's because I have to add a little bit more blue. I don't know what pigment this is, but this is probably pale yellow or cadmium yellow.
So, and to clarify, the percentages are the amount of water you add to the pigment?
No, the percentages are the different pigments. So this is 100% blue.
Okay.
This is 100% red.
Right.
Or orange is what I was calling it.
Oh, I get it. Okay.
And then you want to slowly mix them, and in the middle it's half of each. Same here. So 50% yellow, 50% blue. So I love the color swatching. I never thought I would, and I took a workshop with a wonderful artist, and she made us all color swatch, and I sort of rolled my eyes, but by the end of the day, I was addicted to it. It's really nice to do. And it also just teaches you about so much about controlling your paints, knowing how to mix, how to keep your paint clean, how to make flat washes, how to glaze if you need to add another layer. It's all good. So does anyone have questions about that?
Nope.
Wonderful. Everybody happy painting? Wonderful. All right. So usually at this time of class, I make a little note to myself about everything I said I would put on the classroom. Because I do find that when I go later to do it, I don't remember. So let's see, Google Classroom this week. Just some fun artists I was thinking about adding.
You're going to put some of your artwork on the Google Classroom?
Yeah, sketchbook art, sure. Anything else?
Cold versus hot press paper.
Okay, I'll bring it to class next week.
Okay.
And maybe suggestions for kids' art supplies.
Okay.
Under $1,000.
Good idea.
You know, Shmiki makes a kit that's half this size, which is really nice.
You know, I like the one that you suggested, that koi one. Looked good.
Oh yeah,
The
yeah.
trap.
You know, my materials lists tend to focus on sort of the lowest price point that will give you some bang. So I tend to make the materials list be art supplies that are worth it but not expensive. Some art supplies are super duper worth it and super duper expensive. Some are so cheap as to be useless. So the materials lists tend to be cued to that level of the lowest entry point, yet also going to be fun.
That's nice. I appreciate that. The other thing was when you, for the brushes, You
Mhm.
actually put 2 sets of brushes in there? Did you
Oh,
want?
that may be a
2
mistake. I'll check my materials list.
Okay. I mean, there were only 3 things on there, but I know that you had said maybe get some of that white out and, or
Yeah,
white and
yeah.
whatever.
I also, because of quarantine and shelter in place, I've been trying to keep my materials list extra simple so that
Yeah.
perhaps you don't even have to shop at all.
Uh-huh.
So here's the Pro White.
You know, apparently I think you can get that at Walmart.
Oh,
Really?
I don't ever go to Walmart, so I wouldn't know.
I don't either, but oh, well, anyway.
One
But
of
it was
my,
surprising they had it. That's, I mean,
this is
I
something
wasn't there either, but
yeah.
yeah.
This is masking liquid, which I've come to really love lately. So I may add that to the list. You can play with it if you want. So I was gonna do some rice paper, cold press, hot press, and Bristol paper, and we'll just have a little paper talk next week.
You were going to put some of Georgia O'Keeffe's art.
Oh yeah. Okay. And then I follow a couple people on Instagram, and I, some of them do the sort of swatch work that we have been playing with today. So I was gonna post them. All right. So check
And then
material.
do we have homework?
I think I made some homework up for you guys. It's in the Google Classroom, and I've forgotten what it is. Let me go see.
And are we going to continue to put homework in the stream, or do you want it in homework?
You know, I think I sort of prefer it in the stream. The homework system is a little bit weird.
Yeah.
Um,
I think the
yeah,
easiest way possible is good.
Yeah, I think that the stream is actually easier. And I need to invite you all to the classroom because that's the easiest way to join. So I'll send you an invitation right after class.
So the stream is on Google Classroom?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's sort
You
of at
can
the top, right? I mean, like when you go in,
open it.
it just
When you
is,
open the
it's
classroom, it's the first thing. And it'll give you a chance to share. It says share something with your class, and you all have permission to write something there and send it.
and you can also attach your pictures there.
Yeah. If you guys want me to share the screen, you can have a quick look at it.
Sure.
Yeah, let me share my screen. And then let me go into Google Classroom. Yeah. And then just a sec. I'm on my. Here we go. So now you should be able to see my screen. And if you want to share something, you can type a message here. And you can share to all students, or I think you can share to me too. I can enable that. And then you can add, see here, you can add a file from your Google Drive or a link to a website or a file that's on your computer, which is probably what you're going to use, or a YouTube video. And then the main bulk of classes, like when I post all the sketchbook drawings and things like that, they'll show up here under classwork.
Where do we get the homework assignment? Is that under homework?
Yeah, it's also in the stream because I just posted them.
Oh,
So they're right
okay.
here. So like here's week 1, instructions.
Okay.
And then I'm also gonna post some things in the classroom that you can, like the O'Keeffe paintings, you might want to try just copying one and seeing what you can do with it. So I'll post a couple great watercolors who are fairly simple to work with, and you can see if you want to copy them. Or you can just do watercolor of your own choosing and send it to me and we'll discuss. You may also just want to post your sampler that you made or make some more. I find them to be sort of meditatively rewarding. So you can do that as well. I'll post mine.
Do I have to post the color swatches?
Yeah, if you want, or just post the little brushwork sampler we did earlier.
Okay.
So this may be dry enough to erase, but I'd still be pretty careful with it.
And you know, the other thing I notice is if everybody just says, I mean, like, I'm happy with you talking about my artwork with everybody else listening. And I think it's good information for all of us because we all are sort of painting. I mean, you know, you can learn from what you tell other people about their work.
Yeah.
And I like that. I like that.
I'm glad you like it. You know, when I take a workshop from an expert painter, I actually spend a fair portion of the workshop following the painter around and listening to what they say to other people.
Interesting.
I noticed after the first few times I took expert workshops from expert painters, he would say the same thing to everyone. I just spend a little bit of time of each workshop listening to what the teacher is saying. And I also find that you, in the last class, I was very encouraged at the student feedback that you guys were giving. It was really sweet and charming to see the community develop. So I'm hoping we can do some more of that. If you are super shy and you don't want your stuff reviewed on the air, you may want to just send it to me via email or mark your submission that you just want my feedback and not the class feedback. Just say so out loud, because when I'm offering critique live on camera, I'm pretty much just looking for the next one rather than viewing ahead of time whether that person wants a live review or not. So make it really obvious so we don't do it by accident. All right?
When you said about copying another watercolorist, one of their works of art, I've never worked in watercolor before. Do you draw it first with pencil lightly and then paint over it?
Yeah, and if you still want to just play with marks and colors, you can. But I'll send a couple of artists whose work I really enjoy, who are very sort of simple and straightforward. Some of them have tutorials online, which are literally paint an animal, let it dry, now draw some eyes in it and some ears. Like, some of it is so simple, it's really fun to just sort of follow along. It's a little bit like making a kit out of Lego instead of free building with Lego. I mean, both of those things are good ways to use Lego, but sometimes it's good just to follow what other people are doing.
Great, thank you.
And I didn't see the link to the Google Classroom. You're going to send that out, the code?
I sent it out right before class, and I'll send it out again to all of you. And I'll also just send you an invite from inside the Google Classroom. And then it's pretty simple. It'll just say, do you want to join this classroom? And then you do.
Oh, yeah,
Great.
that's a good one.
Anything else you'd like to see on there? Oh, let me put on the lecture notes, like whatever I made today, I'll put up. Which is always kind of nice. And then I have a kind of a new consolidated YouTube channel, and it's just one that's called Ann McMillan. My old one is called Ann McMillan Art, but I wasn't able to load up big files to it, so I have a new one. And I'll send you a link to that too.
Fun.
And were you going to teach a acrylic painting class?
Yeah, I am. My acrylic painting class is going to start after the 4th of July break.
Right, the 9th or so, yeah.
Yeah, because we're almost to the 4th of July, and if I had started it this week, nobody would come. So it's going to start on the 9th. And it'll run 4 weeks, and it's going to be really experiential and sort of play around with techniques and ideas.
Wait a minute, we're here this week.
Yeah, you're here this week, but I don't think anybody's going to be here on Thursday.
Because it's on Thursday.
Yeah, because almost every company I know has said we're just not working this week. Everybody go take a break.
You guys need a vacation anyway. Gee, everybody has been working hard to keep us occupied.
Yeah, well, it's more the people who are in Zoom calls all day long for their job, which they used to go to the office for, who need a break. Like my husband, he needs a break. Yeah. Okay, any other questions, you guys?
No, that's great.
Thanks,
And
Joanne.
Thank
try
you.
process
Thank you, Ann.
and put it up.
Thank
as-
you.
Oh, look what you did. Anybody want to share?
Whoa.
I love it. I love it. Anybody else going to share?
So I'll share.
No.
Oh, pretty.
Ooh, pretty.
Right they are.
I did this.
Oh, wow. Wonderful. Wow, you guys are so good. Cool.
Mhm.
Anne was very shyly holding hers up. Oh, that's
Right
pretty.
for-
Oh, nice. That's nice.
And your
There we
swatch
go.
is really
Does
great.
that look about right?
Yeah, that does look about right.
Yeah.
I would make the 75% blue darker.
Oh, that's pretty. That one's
Yeah.
pretty.
Yeah.
Sharon.
All right.
I feel like I'm getting a lot of muddy colors in the middle, but that's what you're supposed to get, right?
Well, if you're going from orange to blue, the idea is to get many colors. If you're going from yellow to green, then you'll get light greens. It just depends on what you chose.
Okay.
Mm.
Kind of what I did one that was blue to, so they
Ooh.
go right through the middle of the color wheel in this one. So I
Mhm.
go
Uh-huh.
through brown.
Okay.
But this one, I go around the color wheel. So I don't go
Uh-huh.
through brown, I go through green.
Uh,
It just depends.
1, 2, 3, 4.
All right.
Hmm.
All right. I'll hang out online for a minute more. If anybody has a sort of a more private question, they can just hang out for a minute. Thanks, Anne.
Yeah,
Thank you. Have a good
Thank
holiday.
you.
Great.
Take care, everybody.
Yep, be safe. Bye.
Thank you. Just made it darker.
Okay, excellent. You want to show it to me again? Excellent. Oh, yeah. Now make the middle one a little darker. Sorry, I'm cleaning by committee here, but then you'll be there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Thank
Take
you.
care. Please join my Google Classroom. The ad code is number 5, X-ray, radio, Papa, Tango, November, number 5. Thank you for joining Anne's Art Desk. These videos are brought to you by the City of Palo Alto and the Palo Alto Art Center Foundation.